Most people don't realize that the majority of their emotional exhaustion doesn't come from what happens to them. It comes from how quickly they surrender control of their inner world to what happens around them. There's a reflex built into us, almost automatic. Something goes wrong, someone says something, a situation doesn't meet our expectations, and instantly we react. Not consciously, not intentionally, but habitually. And in that moment, we've already lost something valuable. The space between what happens and how we respond. That space is where your power lies. If you pay attention, you'll start to notice that two people can go through the exact same experience and walk away with completely different emotional outcomes. One is frustrated, overwhelmed, maybe even resentful. The other is calm, composed, and unaffected. The difference isn't the situation. It's the interpretation. It's the level of control each person has over their internal state. And that control is not something you're born with. It's something you build deliberately over time. When you begin to master your inner world, you stop living at the mercy of external triggers. You stop allowing every opinion, every inconvenience, every unexpected moment to dictate your mood. Instead, you develop a kind of psychological discipline. You pause, you observe, you create distance between the event and your reaction. And in that pause, something important happens. You reclaim authorship over your own experience. This doesn't mean you become emotionless. It means you become intentional. There's a misconception that strength is about suppressing what you feel. It's not. Suppression is fragile. It builds pressure, and eventually, it breaks. True strength is about understanding what you feel without being controlled by it. It's the ability to say, I notice this reaction in me, but I don't have to act on it. That level of awareness changes everything, because now you're no longer operating on autopilot. You're making choices, and most people don't realize how often they give that choice away. They let a single comment ruin their entire day. They let one moment of rejection define their self-worth. They let other people's moods become their responsibility. But if you step back and really examine it, none of those things have inherent power. They only gain power through your participation, through the meaning you assign to them, through the attention you give them, and through the emotional energy you invest. So, the real question becomes, why are you giving so much authority to things you don't control? Mastering your inner world requires a shift in perspective. Instead of asking, why did this happen to me? You begin asking, what is within my control right now? And the answer is almost always the same: your thoughts, your interpretation, and your response. That's it. Not the past, not other people, not the outcome you hoped for. Just those three things. And when you focus there, something changes. You stop trying to control everything outside of you, which is exhausting and often impossible. And you start refining what's inside of you, which is where real stability is built. Think about how much of your stress comes from trying to manage things that were never yours to manage in the first place. Other people's opinions, their expectations, their behavior. It's a losing game. But when you redirect that energy inward, when you start developing clarity over your own mind, you create a kind of resilience that doesn't depend on circumstances being perfect. You become steady even when things aren't. This is where emotional maturity begins. Not when life gets easier, but when you become more grounded in how you navigate it. When you stop reacting impulsively and start responding deliberately. When you recognize that just because something demands your attention doesn't mean it deserves your reaction. And that distinction is everything. Because once you understand that, you start to move differently. You don't rush to defend yourself. You don't feel the need to engage in every disagreement. You don't internalize every negative experience. Instead, you evaluate. You choose. You decide what aligns with your values and what doesn't. And anything that doesn't, you let pass without attaching yourself to it. That's not weakness. That's control. And over time, that control compounds. The more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. Situations that used to trigger you start to lose their intensity. People who used to affect you start to feel less significant, not because they've changed, but because you have. Your threshold has shifted, your awareness has deepened, and your ability to remain centered, regardless of what's happening around you, has strengthened. This is the foundation for everything else. Detachment, boundaries, resilience. It all starts here, with how well you can govern your own internal state. Because at the end of the day, life will always present you with reasons to react. There will always be noise, pressure, unpredictability. But you don't have to become a reflection of that chaos. You have the ability to remain grounded, to remain clear, to remain in control of yourself, even when everything around you isn't. And that's the standard you have to hold. Because the moment you stop letting the outside world dictate your inner state is the moment you stop being controlled by it and start becoming someone who controls their life from within. If you look closely at what tends to disturb people the most, it's rarely the event itself. It's the meaning they attach to it. 2 words, 1 glance, a delayed response, a missed opportunity. None of these things are inherently powerful. But the moment you interpret them as rejection, disrespect, or failure, they begin to take on weight. And that weight is what follows you. That's what lingers in your mind long after the moment has passed. Most people don't realize they are not reacting to reality. They are reacting to their interpretation of reality. And that interpretation is often shaped by a deep need for validation. We want to be understood. We want to be respected. We want to feel seen and valued. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. But the problem begins when your emotional stability becomes dependent on those things. When your sense of self is tied to how others perceive you, you become vulnerable to every shift in tone, every change in behavior, every opinion that doesn't align with your own. That's when small things start to feel big. That's when neutral moments start to feel personal. Detachment is the discipline that breaks that pattern. Now, detachment is often misunderstood. People hear it and think it means becoming distant, cold, or indifferent. That's not what it is. Detachment is not about disconnecting from life. It's about disconnecting from the need to control how life unfolds and how others respond to you. It's about removing unnecessary emotional investment from things that were never meant to define you in the first place. Because the truth is, not everything deserves your emotional reaction. When someone misunderstands you, you don't have to rush to correct it. When someone doesn't recognize your value, you don't have to convince them. When something doesn't go your way, you don't have to internalize it as a reflection of your worth. These are choices, and most people make them unconsciously, driven by habit rather than awareness. But once you start practicing detachment, you begin to see those moments differently. You begin to ask yourself, is this actually significant, or am I making it significant? And that question alone creates distance. It interrupts the automatic response. It gives you a chance to evaluate instead of react. A lot of emotional suffering comes from overinterpretation. We read too much into things. We assign intent where there may be none. We create narratives that reinforce our insecurities. And then we respond to those narratives as if they are facts. That's how something small becomes something heavy. Detachment is what allows you to step back from that process. It's the ability to experience something without immediately attaching meaning to it. To let it exist without turning it into a story about yourself. Because not everything is about you. Not every action is a reflection of your worth. Not every outcome is a measure of your value. And when you truly understand that, you stop taking things personally. You stop carrying conversations in your head long after they've ended. You stop replaying moments, trying to decode what someone meant or why something happened. You stop giving temporary situations permanent space in your mind. That's where freedom begins. Because now, your emotional state is no longer tied to constant analysis. You're not exhausting yourself trying to interpret every detail. You're not chasing clarity from people who may never give it. You're not seeking validation in places where it was never guaranteed. Instead, you become more grounded in yourself.